everyone, to the Capitol Rundown. I'm Kara Sundlin. Thank you for streaming with us on WFSB+. This is where you're going to get the inside scoop on the politics that's affecting your life in Connecticut. And we have our insiders, former Republican House Leader Themis Klarides and Democratic strategist Jimmy Tickey, who are both insiders from both sides of the aisle. I think we need a little balance. We can all get different perspectives, so I love that we're doing this show. Everyone out there, tell your friends so that we can get perspectives that are intelligent and from both sides. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so we're going to get right to it, and we're going to talk about some of the things that have happened on the national scale with President Trump, but that are affecting here. And that is, he announced that he wanted the Department of Education disbanded. We have Linda McMahon, who's running it, who's obviously a well-known candidate and businesswoman in Connecticut. So from what you've been hearing in both circles of Democrats and Republicans, getting rid of the Department of Education, how is that going to affect people living here in Connecticut? Themis, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, it's not an easy thing. First of all, the president cannot do it unilaterally. Congress is given the authority by the Constitution to make the laws, and then the president kind of has to, implement them, so to speak. So Congress actually are the ones that have to vote to get rid of any cabinet organization like that. So the Department of Education in this circumstance. And I think the thing that frustrates me is I certainly believe that government is very top heavy, and there's a lot of efficiencies that can be made. But it's the whole argument of how you do it, right? And I'm not sure that just getting rid of an entire agency and a department is the best way to do it. I mean, there are ways to get those efficiencies. The other problem is if you're going to just end up cutting all these people and firing all these people and defunding a lot of the agency, even if it's not, gotten rid of by Congress, then you're not allowing people who have student aid, people, who have issues that the national department affects. But, one of their big arguments is, we want to bring education back to the local level. It already is at the local level. Most decisions on your kids' education in every town in Connecticut and different states around the country are made on the local level. I mean, clearly there's things that go on with financial aid, at the national level, and obviously discrimination issues at the national level. But there are efficiencies that need to be had, but taking them with a scalpel, a scalpel is the better idea, but a chainsaw may not be the best way to go.
Chainsaw. Jimmy, I see you nodding your head. Obviously, you're not in favor of getting rid of the Department of Education, but how does it really affect us? Because we do know most of the money is coming from Connecticut, but I think I read 8% from the federal government. It's still a lot.
It's still a lot. I mean, as was said, this has been a chainsaw to these federal agencies, and these are not bureaucrats sitting in D.C., but these are people that work here in Connecticut and that we see the impacts of federal budgets in Connecticut every single day. 90% of kids go to a public school. And in her memo to the department yesterday, Linda McMahon said this was the final mission of the Department of Education. This has long been a promise of President Trump that he would disband and dismantle the Department of Education. And as Themis said, this is unable to be done at the presidential level. You do need an act of Congress to abolish a department, but what he can do is he can defund it. He can have executive orders to roll back protections for students, to roll back funding, to cut staffing. You'll see class size explode. You'll see the need in schools to grow greater on the states then for that kind of help and support. Worker training programs, job training programs would be cut. So it really would have devastating impacts. And of all the issues they could be working on, they're prioritizing abolishing the Department of Education, where our kids get an education every day.
Let's also remember that this is not a President Trump initiative only. I mean, most presidents that are Republican throughout history, not all, but most, and most Republicans have brought up this issue of getting rid of the Department of Education. So in his defense, I still have the same feelings I have about it. You should take a scalpel to it, not a chainsaw. It is more of a Republican thing than a Trump thing.
Okay. I guess I don't know that a lot of people realize that. We keep thinking that this is a wild idea. You're saying this has been promoted, or
it doesn't mean it's still
discussed.
Not a wild idea. Okay.
Right.
I'm not defending it. I'm just making the point that
a lot of other Republican presidents
it's not a brand new idea that just came up here.
Okay.
And no one would argue with efficiencies. Let's find some efficiencies in all the federal governments. I think people are on board with that. But again, Elon Musk with his Doge If you want to abolish a department, how about that? They have been going after every single department, firing federal workers. Last week fired 6,000 veterans, gutting every agency. This has real effects, and what you've been seeing is that people have been speaking up, and then they've been going back. Courts have been active, so they say they will make these sort of drastic cuts to Department of Education, but let people know about this and speak up, and let the courts have their say. And maybe then they'll move more with a scalpel than a sledgehammer, as they are doing now for public education.
And that's why DOGE, you know, in concept is a good idea, right? It's back to the no, but it's you know, I find myself saying this a lot in the past, you know, 6 years, 8 years, that, you know, I can agree with a lot of policies. I just may not agree with how they're being done.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's a lot of it. Back to DOGE. I mean, it's government efficiency, right? I mean, that's the name of it.
Right.
And it's about cutting fat, and, you know, things are too top heavy, and bureaucracy is too great. And most people agree with that. And I think that's part of the reason that Donald Trump got elected, because they believe, like, government is not working for me. Government is too big. You're not serving me, my family, my kids, or education, not keeping me safe. You know, what's going on here? Like,
Right.
we need to, you know, I have to do it in my house. We have to do it, you know, at our job. Why don't you have to do it on the government level? So I think the concept is a very important concept. But again, it's how we get there, and how, you know, what happens in the meantime. You want to limit the hurt,
Yeah.
and
Or
have as much help as possible.
we'll write interesting articles about some veterans feeling like they were betrayed because they voted for him and now they lost their job, or some people being called back to the CDC. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. For our part, in Connecticut, it made news that we gave $40 million. The governor signed a special education bill. I know a lot of parents are concerned that the Department of Education does handle a lot of special education. So if you have a child with ADHD or learning disorders and you're on an IEP, or you're on a 504 plan, or you need a paraprofessional to help you at school, there are concerns about parents wondering how the kids who have different styles of learning are going to be supported without all this. And now there's this bill that the governor signed for $40 million that's going to help kids in Connecticut. Can you weigh in on that? And is that going to help us? Is that not enough? Or what do people need to understand?
Well, it's somewhat complicated, but as simply as I can put it, in the state of Connecticut, each student costs X amount of dollars to educate. And then if you have a special education needs student, that student costs more to educate because they have special needs, obviously. But the way the statute is written in the state of Connecticut is, if you're a school district and you have to pay for that special needs child, then the town, the school district, has to pay for that, all that extra money, up until 4.5 times the non-special ed student. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. So for years, me and probably every legislator in the legislature has put in bills to lower it to 3, to lower it to 2, to lower it to 1, so the towns get more relief. Because what happens when there's unfunded mandates on towns, which is what this is, because you're not getting funded for it, you have to pay it out of your own town coffers. Your property taxes go up, and that's like the biggest tax that people have an issue with in the state of Connecticut. So this bill put $40 million into the fund to try and help the state give the towns and cities more money for special education.
So does that mean if you get rid of the Department of Education, which helps with special ed, that property taxes in Connecticut will likely go up?
No, because we're dealing with state funding the towns, right?
Okay.
But then, of course, the federal government funds some of the state departments. So it all trickles down at a certain point. But that particular issue was more of a state issue.
More of a state issue. So, Jimmy, can you weigh in on if this is going to be, how it's going to affect us? And what about those parents who are so concerned that their children will not get the education they need?
Right. Well, funding is funding, right? So if we're seeing less money come down from the federal government, that is then less that the states will have to work with as they make ends meet for their own budget. So as the president is cutting and slashing so many of these budgets, it really does trickle down to the states in a bad way, where then states and localities have to then make ends meet for their education and other budgets. The $40 million was a good idea that was negotiated between the legislature and the governor. The governor signed it, and in the bill that the governor signed, it actually hits towns even faster. By the end of April, they'll see that $40 million across the state. And I know that within that bill, Democrats led an effort to form a committee to take a look at a holistic approach of the special education funding and what can be done for reforms for some of the cost-cutting measures, but also what are the ways ways in which we can add more money to those coffers so that towns don't feel the pressure of the special education funding that we need to make sure we obligate towards our special education children.
And so back to not a first time with an idea, like literally every year. This is putting more money to special education is one of those ideas that falls into, in the legislature as kind of nonpartisan in a lot of ways. I mean, you have people that just don't think the budget should increase at all, but generally speaking, every year we do this. So I will just take issue with him saying the Democrats put it together because it's a Democrat and Republican thing.
And in the bill that was supported in the state legislature, all but one Republican did vote against it.
Because there were two bills. Because, not to get into confusion here, but one took $40 million to explain it to people at home. It's like you taking money out of your savings account versus you taking money out of putting your money on your credit card. The one that most Republicans didn't support was not putting more money on our credit card that we already have a huge credit card bill for anyway. It was taking money out of your savings account.
So the disagreement on how to fund it.
Yes,
but there is some bipartisan agreement that special ed is important.
Right, and this gets into a whole conversation I'm sure we will have over the coming weeks, which is really the budget and the fiscal guardrails and staying within those. And so in the bill that was passed, it was about taking the money from the interest of our COVID funds that we still have a little bit left of in the state of Connecticut and taking it from the interest of those federal dollars that came in. Proof, again, that the federal funding is really important, and we need to not abolish the Department of Education, but have our federal departments to give state the wherewithal to make these sorts of investments.
Okay. We're going to switch topics, and it's still on education, though, in that if you are a parent like me and you have a senior in high school going to college, this has been a big time. A lot of college decisions coming in. Mid-March is a time where people are making final decisions. They're getting. UConn decisions came out. And at least in my focus group of West Hartford and Hartford, there were a lot of parents really upset that they've got these incredible students who even have above a 4.0, and they did not get into UConn stores unless they did early decision. This was the first year that UConn allowed early decision. I'll just explain that really quick, that's an agreement. You say I'll ED. If they let you in, then you get in and you have to go. Some kids didn't want to do that because you also can't negotiate the money as much. Anyway, at least in my unofficial, all the emails I'm getting and calls of saying, how is this possible that none of these great kids got into UConn stores? They were all branched to Hartford or other campuses, and did UConn over-admit? What does this college that we all support, what responsibility does it have to local kids? Themis, I'll start with you. Any inside scoop? Parents are mad.
And they should be mad.
Yeah.
And again, this is another one of those issues that's not particularly partisan, because I would say that most legislators support University of Connecticut. It's our flagship university. We've gotten such notoriety, and that's added to the issue that because the basketball teams are so successful, we've become a nationally known state school. And so more people are applying. And that's wonderful, right? I think we all agree with that. It's a great school. It rises up in the rankings. People know about it. But the fact of the matter is, and we talked about this before, it is a taxpayer subsidized school, which means that in-state students, in my opinion, should have priority to a certain extent. And the fact is, when there were students this year that said, congratulations, you're admitted to University of Connecticut stores, and you will have housing for the next 8 semesters. You as a parent plan that into your budget. I mean, that's part of, do I take loans, do I not take loans? How much we have to budget every year into our lifestyle and into our life. And then I know then they took it back.
They took it back,
They took it back. I think at the very least, the University of Connecticut should guarantee in-state students for 8 semesters of on-campus housing. I mean, where are these kids going to live now? They've accepted it. They told other schools they're not going, right? Now what do you do? The Connecticut legislature and the state of Connecticut have to make a decision on what kind of state university they want to be. I mean, for example, Texas, they send out 70%, 75% of their offers to in-state students. Now, I'm not saying that's good or that's bad, but we have to make a decision. We cannot continue to let this go like this and basically betray the taxpayers of Connecticut.
Jimmy?
Yes, I really do feel for the kids and the families who were counting on, multiple semesters of housing, and then it's changed midstream, and now they only have housing for that first year. So as I understand it, it's guaranteed housing for the first year or your transfer year that you go to UConn. And they just added a new apartment building, on-campus residence hall last year. They also have been leasing off-campus housing, but they got over 61,000 applications last year. Clearly, people are saying yes. Maybe it was in more numbers than they had imagined would be the case. 75% of the undergraduates are Connecticut residents, and so UConn has become a place where students want to be. And it reminds me of the housing problem that we have here in Connecticut, too. We have more people here than we have housing for, and we're looking for more housing and housing development, and particularly affordable housing. UConn is looking for more beds and needs to add more housing in order to meet the demand of the students who want to live on campus. I also think it's interesting when you're thinking about their satellite campuses, Stamford, Waterbury, and Hartford. I've been to the Waterbury and the Stamford campuses, and they have really been growing. And it's an opportunity for young people who maybe if they want to do a semester or two in Stamford or in Waterbury and then think about coming to the UConn stores, there's that guarantee that they will get a year of housing when you transfer in. But to think about building a life around Connecticut, get exposure to our cities, get exposure to maybe working and going to school at the same time, and the Stamford campus has been growing like crazy. So it's something to think about. What is the vision for UConn? And as a statewide university, there might be more options than those who go to the store's campus.
Yeah, and I think we need to also note that for years we've been complaining of the brain drain in Connecticut, that the best and the brightest leave Connecticut to go to college somewhere else, and then they never come back. And now we're kind of doing something in a way that's pushing people out of Connecticut. I mean, this has to be a vision and a policy, and the policy has to follow the vision, right? You want kids to stay here, you need to do things to keep them here.
Yeah,
Right.
and I agree. I think, that would be great if some of the kids who don't want to live in stores could go and revitalize the cities. As a Hartford resident, it's great to have that foot traffic. But I mean, some kids they want the quintessential college experience, so they don't want to go and be on a satellite campus. So they might choose to just go to another state, especially because especially down south, we just did a story about southern schools. It's sometimes cheaper to go out of state, even if you live here in Connecticut. So I guess, let me ask you this. Do you think we should have some sort of a policy that is a direct admit, where we give a lot of preference to in-state students for UConn?
Yeah, I'd be open to that. And again, it looks like right now 75% of the undergraduate students are Connecticut residents. So we're very heavy on Connecticut students. Maybe there was more that accepted that had applied and got accepted and then actually chose UConn. I mean, it has become a world-renowned university, and so I'm sure the university is grappling with the amount of housing that they have, how much housing they can add in a short amount of time to build it up, and then taking a look at then that admittance rate so that students know there's an obligation that if they're going to be admitted, they are going to have housing. Right now, clearly, there's not enough housing for those that were admitted, and so they're trying to make ends meet as they figure out this period of time where there's just not enough beds for those that have accepted UConn.
Yeah. Let's move on in our final time together. A story that maybe made headlines for all the wrong reasons. It's being called the Connecticut Cannibal. There was a man who was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he did cannibalize his victim. And now the idea that he's been rehabilitated and should be let out sooner. I just want to know what you guys think about it. Certainly something that has been making a lot of headlines nationally. I know we're a second chance state. This probably seems a little bit too much to stomach for some people as they hear this story. Themis?
Second chances are one thing, and I think we all believe in rehabilitation. I mean, you do something wrong, and it's like when you're a little kid, you learn. If you get up in the morning and you make your bed and you eat your breakfast, right, and you go to school, everything should stay kind of even keel at home. But if you wake up and you draw on your wall with crayons, you're going to get into trouble, right? So when you're an adult, those are called laws, and he broke a law, and it was by reason of insanity. He actually went and killed somebody, like bludgeoned somebody, didn't just kill him, and then then ate his eyeball and part of his brain. Now, listen, clearly there was a mental issue here, and he was put in the Connecticut hospital that deals with that, and that's where he should be. That's where he should be. He was given 60 years. I understand that most people do not serve all their time, but 10 years, when you hear people saying, oh, he's a nice guy, and he seems to have been doing well. Well, I mean, you don't just go and eat somebody's eyeball and then say, it was just a one-off. I don't really feel like that anymore. I don't even understand how that works, right? I just don't get it. And if he's going to be rehabilitated, I mean, 10 years is not the number to me.
Jimmy?
Anything to say?
I also
Is there
agree.
some bipartisan agreement?
Yes, there is.
Holy cow.
Yes. I also agree in the second chance society, right? And there's so many people incarcerated that are there, particularly in black and brown communities, around drug offenses. And we should take a look at that, and there should be second chances given. But that is not this. And this was a really gruesome murder. And the family is living in fear. And the family has said that they kept reaching out to the psychiatric hospital, ensuring that he would never be released because they feared that this day would come. And they were always told, it won't happen. He is at the psychiatric hospital getting the rehabilitation that he needs, but that he would never be released. And now he's released. So it is concerning, given just how gruesome and inhumane the murder was about 10 years ago.
So we're going to leave it there. I think we've hit a lot of topics. I hope you've been enjoying the Capitol Rundown streaming on WFSB Plus. Make sure you let your friends know it's always streaming here Wednesdays at 2 p.m. and you can watch it later on WFSB.com. And of course, you can follow me, Themis, Jimmy. Follow us all. We'll be posting about it. But thank you for the time. I feel well informed. Thank you to our insiders. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.